Iran has successfully tested the Russian-made S-300 missile defense system. The operational test was conducted to gauge the performance of the missile system using a whole range of flying targets. It featured scenarios simulating the most modern threats. The test came to assess how capable the system is in striking radar-evading targets, countering ballistic threats, and assessing Iranian experts' capability to handle and use the system. The test also featured exercises to identify and intercept projected targets in an electronic warfare environment.
بالستیک رهگیری و منهدم شد. موشک‌های S-300 همچنین چند فروند پهپاد را منهدم کردند. آزمایش یک فروند فرمانده قرارگاه پدافند هوایی خاتم.
A high-profile North Korean defector has warned that the regime may conduct a nuclear test or test-fire an intercontinental ballistic missile around the birthday of late founder Kim Il-sung next month. North Korea will mark the 105th birthday of the late leader on April 15th. Speaking to Seoul-based Yonhap news agency, Tae Yong-ho said Pyongyang could carry out a provocation on a large scale around the anniversary. He says North Korea feels cornered because of the killing of Kim Jong-un's half-brother in Malaysia with the use of a banned chemical weapon. This as Seoul and Washington are holding their joint annual military drills.
The wreckage of the warplane lies in the countryside in southern Turkey. Rescue teams in Hatay province reached the scene late on Saturday. Locals were first to raise the alarm.
I was sitting at home and I heard the plane. I knew something had happened. I saw the plane stuck in the ground like an arrow and I saw smoke. We raced over to where it fell. There was fire in 3 places. The plane's ammunition had fallen into the trees.
Turkish officials found the wreckage, but the cockpit was empty. The Syrian rebel group Harar al-Shem released a video claiming to show them firing on a regime plane in Idlib province. They say they brought the plane down, but the video doesn't show an explosion. And the group isn't known to have the capability to shoot planes down. Others on the regime side have claimed that a mechanical failure could have been to blame, with Syrian state TV confirming that contact with a jet had been lost. What is known is that regime airstrikes were being conducted in Idlib province on Saturday. 7 died in the village of Al-Dana, and there were strikes in Sarmada and Ma'arat Misrin. The Syrian regime has lost dozens of planes in this nearly 6-year-long conflict. This, just the latest to go down.
Next to the rubble of Mosul's bombed-out university, a new campus has been hurriedly built, a refugee camp for 30,000 people. It was only opened 2 days ago, but aid agencies say it'll be full within a week. For these people, freedom of sorts after almost 3 years under the rule of so-called Islamic State. There are thought to be 750,000 civilians trapped inside western Mosul. Under siege, without food or water, and in fear of their lives, some have managed to escape. Fighting is still heavy, but government troops say they're easing Islamic State's grip on Mosul, its last major stronghold in Iraq. With IS threatening to kill those who leave the city and relentless shelling from the government side, escape isn't easy.
That's a car bomb rattling western Mosul. It was likely set off by ISIS. Several police officers were wounded. Iraqi forces, backed by the U.S. military, are trying to retake the city from ISIS. Meanwhile, the terror group is suspected of carrying out a chemical attack on civilians in Mosul this past week. Here's Jonathan Vigliotti.
Rena, the United Nations in a statement today called the attacks a possible war crime as they wait for confirmation on what chemicals, if any, were used. The UN confirmed at least 12 people are being treated at a hospital in Erbil. Among the injured, 5 children and a 1-month-old baby. According to the Red Cross, the alleged chemical weapons caused blisters, vomiting, and severe swelling around the eyes. The injuries happened in 2 separate attacks in eastern Mosul beginning Wednesday. This woman said a rocket landed in her home and sprayed her family with what she described as an oily chemical. Eastern Mosul was once controlled by ISIS until U.S.-backed Iraqi forces recaptured it in January. It's still unclear who's to blame for the attack, but the mortars were apparently fired from West Mosul, which is still held by the Islamic State. The unrest has led to a mass exodus. The United States has warned that ISIS could use weapons containing sulfur mustard agents as Iraqi forces now push to liberate Western Mosul. The Islamic State has been suspected of making and using chemical weapons in territory it controls in Iraq and neighboring Syria, but this week's attack would mark the first time the terror group used chemical weapons in Mosul.
First this hour, Islamic State terrorists are rapidly retreating westwards after being pushed out of the Syrian city of Palmyra. In their wake, they had set fire to the Hayyan gas fields. And this now is exclusive footage that was filmed by our Rutley video agency. As you can see there, black smoke rising high into the sky from those burning gas outlets.
ISIS set this gas field on fire before they were defeated, and just next to it, this is the Hayyan company that ISIS blew up in January, inflicting electricity blackouts on Syrian people, particularly in the capital, Damascus. Now, all across this landscape, there you can see more fires from the gas fields, and further beyond, fire from oil fields that were set alight by ISIS. So despite the fact that ISIS have now been defeated here, they're still inflicting huge economic damage and huge suffering on the Syrian people because of this sabotage that they have done.
Libyan militias have seized control of the country's biggest oil terminals after fighting with armed forces.
Latest attacks are a blow to renegade General Khalifa Haftar, widely seen as Libya's strongman, and they threaten oil production, which has been increasing lately. The Benghazi Defense Brigades targeted two of the largest oil terminals, Al Sidra and nearby Ras Lanuf. They lie in a resource-rich region hugging the northern coast. Along with two other ports, Brega and Zuwaitania, they make up what's called the Oil Crescent of Libya. Before the fall of the Gaddafi regime in 2011, Libya was pumping 1.6 million barrels of oil a day. Fighting and political chaos since reduced much of that. But in September, the so-called Libyan National Army, headed by Khalifa Haftar, seized control of the Oil Crescent. Production rose to around 700,000 barrels a day. Now, Libya continues to be split between two competing governments. One, based in the eastern city of Tobruk, is backed by Haftar and his forces. The other, recognized by the UN, is in the capital, Tripoli. It condemned Friday's attacks and says it has no role in what happened.
China looks set to boost its defense spending by 7% this year. This only days after the Trump administration said it would boost its military spending by 10%, a budget about 4 times larger than China's. There's widespread anxiety over Beijing taking a tougher stance in territorial disputes in the East and South China Seas.
We need to have the capability to defend our sovereignty and rights and interests. Particularly, we have to prevent external powers from intervening in these disputes. The strengthening of China's ability is beneficial to maintain the peace and security of this region.
Fu did not specify what meddling she was referring to, but Beijing has been very much criticizing the US military presence. It says Washington is there to stir regional tensions. Experts believe the rivalry between the two powers would result in a dangerous arms race.
Both China and the US are interested in grabbing up the energy resources. It was a 2013 study by the U.S. Energy Information Administration that estimated the total oil reserves to be 11 billion barrels in the region. I think the U.S. is definitely going to increase its defense spending as well. Donald Trump has made that very clear that he's going for an estimated 10% increase to the U.S. military budget in general. This is very likely the beginning of an arms race within the region.
Another US move which China deems provocative is the plan to deploy the controversial THAAD missile system to South Korea, as well as the ongoing joint war games between the two countries on the Korean peninsula. Though Washington and Seoul say the moves are aimed at countering the threat of North Korea, Beijing has made it clear that they are causing security concerns. Now, with both the US and China planning more spending on their military, there are increasing concerns over the future.
Our problem is, and I hope China will not go that way, is militarism. That means you try to solve fundamentally civilian problems, conflicts, etc., by military means. You promote democracy by military means. You promote regime change by military means.
Beijing is opposed to the US efforts to have more Navy patrols in the South China Sea. It claims sovereignty over most of the sea, but the US and a number of regional countries neighboring the sea dispute the claims. With the territorial disputes unlikely to be settled in the near future, the prospect of rivalry between China and the United States in this strategic and oil-rich region is wide open. It could even reach higher levels unless the two sides decide to resolve it through non-military means.
Israel has officially become a gas exporter after completing its first delivery to Jordan from an offshore field. The exports to Israel's Arab neighbor actually started in January, but there was no formal announcement until now. The Jordanian firms Bromine and Arab Potash signed a deal with Israel in 2014 to import over 2 billion cubic meters of gas from Israel's Tamar field. The gas will be exported to Jordan over the course of the next 15 years in a deal worth over $770 million. Jordan is one of only 2 Arab countries that have a peace deal with the Jewish state, but the Jordanian people are not very happy of it, especially given that almost 50% of them are of Palestinian origin. Historically, Israel has had very few natural resources, but after the discovery of a series of offshore gas fields, the Jewish state is beginning to make major deals with its neighbors in the Middle East.
Back now with some big changes when you go through security at the airport. Those pat-downs expected to be more rigorous starting next week.
Tonight, a new plan to combat potential TSA security failures at airports nationwide, targeting many travelers' least favorite part of flying, the pat-down. Up until now, TSA officers made risk-based assessments for each passenger, choosing one of 5 pat-down methods accordingly. Now, a single standardized method will be used universally. Long-standing policy includes the head, neck, arms, torso, legs, and feet, and sensitive areas such as the breast, groin, and the buttocks, requiring sufficient pressure to ensure detection. Currently, flyers can opt for a pat-down instead of the screening machine, or be subject to one if TSA detects a red flag.
If you're an average traveler, like most of us, we know we're not guilty of carrying anything, but they don't know that.
The new policy comes 2 years after a damaging report that found major security lapses across the country. Weapons and other hazardous materials made it past screening in 95% of tests conducted. TSA says this is not expected to increase time at security and will only enhance safety measures.
Syrian university students fleeing war and facing an American administration that views Syrian refugees with heightened suspicion, getting a warm welcome in Mexico. A small but growing group of Syrian refugees are heading there in order to complete their education. Syrian student Amir Barra arriving this week in Mexico City, draped in the local flag and speaking the national language.
In Mexico, there are no walls. There are hugs and hearts that are open to us. At the end of the day, we're all humans. Religion, our origins, it doesn't matter. In the end, we're all brothers and sisters in humanity. I hope peace comes to Syria and to reign throughout the world. Hopefully, I go back to my family and friends in Syria to take part in the reconstruction.
The scene at Mexico's international airport is in stark contrast to the protests earlier this year at U.S. airports following President Trump's now defunct travel ban against residents coming from 7 predominantly Muslim countries, including Barra's home country, Syria.
Canadian officials have reportedly refused to tighten its borders so as to deter migrants from crossing illegally into the country from the United States. Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale said that the issue of illegal immigrants entering the country has not risen to a scale that required hindering the flow of goods and people moving across the world's longest undefended border. Goodale told reporters at a televised news conference in Emerson, Manitoba, "We are concerned, and we will deal properly with the extra hundreds crossing illegally. The immigrants, mainly from Africa and the Middle East, have defied winter conditions and have walked across the border in aspiration of seeking asylum."
Today is March 4th, and supporters of the president
mark that by holding March for Trump rallies all across the nation. Along with Washington, D.C., there were events in Raleigh, North Carolina, Nashville, Tennessee, and Columbus, Ohio. Counter-protesters also showed up at several rallies, and at times, shouting matches broke out. But as Da Lin reports today in Berkeley, the two sides did more than just shout. And a warning for you, you might find some of the images of those bloody fights disturbing.
It was a free-for-all. Trump supporters and anti-Trump protesters going at it. Sometimes it was one-on-one. Other times, large groups of people punching, kicking, and hitting each other with sticks. Bloody noses and faces.
Oh, he just pissed. Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine.
There were so many fights we lost count. Police officers stood by and watched as fight after fight after fight broke out between both sides.
I feel like they should have probably done some a bit sooner. There's already been like 3 or 4 fights. Several people have been pepper sprayed.
This is a sad day, and that we're better than this.
Disney's new live-action musical version of Beauty and the Beast won't show at a drive-in theater in Alabama because of a new gay twist. The message on the Facebook page of the Henniger Drive-In Theater in the northeast portion of the state read, "It is with great sorrow that I have to tell our customers that we will not be showing Beauty and the Beast." The message was removed Friday evening. CNN's attempt to reach the theater owners were unsuccessful. According to director Bill Condon, the character of LeFou, sidekick to the villainous Gaston, has an exclusively gay moment in the PG-rated movie. What that means is unclear. In its rave review, the New York Daily News calls LeFou Disney's first unambiguously gay character.
Russia may not be saying bonjour to Beauty and the Beast. The movie could be banned in Russia if it's found to violate a Russian law prohibiting gay propaganda. An MP of the United Russia Party has asked the country's culture minister to screen the film prior to its March 16th Russian release, and to take measures to totally ban if the film contains elements of propaganda of homosexuality. A Russian law enacted in 2013 prohibits the spread of gay propaganda to minors.
Restaurant in Shanghai's downtown area has employed robot waiters to serve customers. There are 2 types of robots in the restaurant. Some direct their way on one track, that is, and others move freely around the eatery. The robots have proven to be competent and still cheaper than human waiter staff. Moreover, they are novel and fun. The owner of the restaurant believes using robots is a good deal because each one of them only needs $29 worth of electricity charge per year.
Skinning drones, robots could soon be covered in real human flesh, Oxford boffins claim. Just really quick, this is already going on. So we know when they say it could soon be done, no, it's already happening. In fact, I think a lot of our politicians and actors have this going on. I'm not joking. Grab your pitchforks. Scientists want to coat robots in muscle fibers and tissue so they look just like us. Scientists are calling for robots to be made with real human flesh.
Since the beginning of the year, California has weathered 10 major storms that have flooded communities up and down the coast. In the northern part of the state, Big Sur has seen more than 5 feet of rainfall in 2 months, and it nearly washed out the main bridge to the resort community, according to Caltrans spokesman Bob Haas.
Until we are absolutely certain that we can look people in the eye and say, yes, it's safe to drive on this, then we have to keep it closed.
Storm damage has left a dozen monks at the new Camaldoli Hermitage in Big Sur even more isolated than they'd intended.
We're not dying of hunger yet or anything like that.
But Father Robert Hale, talking to us through a satellite video connection, says they are having to ration food and fuel. The monastery is completely off the grid, and its only access road was cut off by a torrential storm last month.
What was it like when this storm was hitting?
It was kind of apocalypse now. Mother Nature is a little angry.